Showtime.
Good afternoon and welcome, or good evening, and welcome to the East Gippsland Shire Ordinary Council Meeting, Tuesday the 7th of August 2018. East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting to enhance the accessibility of its meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are also archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. At the appropriate times during the meeting, any members of the gallery who are addressing the Council will have their image, comments or submissions recorded. Please ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are turned off or in silent mode for the duration of the meeting. On behalf of the Council, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we gathered here for our meeting tonight, the Gunai-Kurnai people, and pay our respects to the elders, both past and present. We also have two special guests in the gallery tonight, Emily Pendergast from Lucknow Primary School and Eva Harringsham from Gippsland Grammar. Welcome. Item 1.2, Mr CEO, do we have any apologies?
We have an apology from Councillor Jackson Roberts.
Thank you. Item 1.3, any declarations of conflict of interest?
I've received none, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Item 1.4 is a confirmation of the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on Tuesday the 3rd of July 2018 be confirmed.
I'm happy to move that for you, Mr Mayor.
Moved Councillor Pels, seconded Councillor Reeves. Is there any questions with those minutes? All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 1.5 is our next meetings. The Ordinary Council meeting will be on Tuesday the 4th of September 2018 to be held at the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 1 p.m. There's also a special council meeting to approve the annual financial statements for 2017-2018 in principle on Tuesday the 11th of September 2018 to also held at the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 p.m. Item 1.6, request for leave of absence.
Yes, Mr Mayor,
Councillor
I would like to be an apology for the Ordinary Council meeting Tuesday the 4th of September.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. Yep. Councillor Pales, seconded Councillor Ellis. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Item 1.7 is public question time.
We've received no questions, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Item 1.8.1 is the record of assemblies of councillors, and we have a list there, and there's also a recommendation, councillors. So moved Councillor O'Connell, seconded Councillor Pels. Is there any questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 1.9.1 is petitions requesting council to declare a dog-friendly beach area in Mallacoota. Ms Bennett.
Councillors, this is if you will, a statutory report in that, in compliance with our meeting procedures local law, when we receive a petition, we're required to table that at the next possible council meeting. In this case, obviously, that's this council meeting. Time didn't exist to have a substantive report prepared, so as the report indicates, that report will come forward to the September meeting. So it's there for your consideration, really, just to complete the requirements of the local law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bennett. A question? No questions? Questions, Councillor Pels?
I'd just like to ask, with regards to the reports that will be coming in, are there time frames, known time frames yet?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Peltz. There are a number of matters that were to do with dog off-leash areas, council staff are working on a proposal to bring back to council a change to the way in which we manage dog off-lead and dog on-leash areas. Currently, the whole municipality is declared a dog on-leash area with 2 areas, exceptions under consideration, one in Bosworth Road, Bairnsdale, and another in Palmers Road, Lakes Entrance. We intend to bring a report to the September meeting, seeking council's approval to declare those 2 sites specifically dog off-lead. Concurrent with that process, we will be preparing a report to come to council to declare the entire municipality dog off-lead, but identifying specific areas within the municipality that will be dog on-lead. In order to do that, we believe we will be required to, or a good best practice to consult with the community moving forward with that, and we will, in the coming weeks, establish a community reference group to float those ideas and then prepare a report to come back to council for consideration. That could take some time to get that final report. So I would imagine that within a 12-month period, we may see the broader change introduced, and that would create a better outcome overall on the basis that areas where it is important that dog be restrained would be identified, but other areas that are located outside of the municipal boundaries people would be free to have their dogs off the lead should they choose to, and where they would do no harm. So we would see that broader amendment, broader change within 12 months, but the 2 dog off-leash areas, one in Lakes Entrance and one in Bairnsdale, we will attempt to resolve as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Pels. There's a recommendation before us, councillors. Moved Councillor Pels, seconded Councillor Ellis. Any speakers?
Yes, I'd like to speak to it. This is, the dog off-leash issue is something that we've been asking for quite some time, so we thank the group of Malakuta for their petition, and we're pleased to be receiving it and to see such support of 600 odd signatories, and it's just a reflection of what is coming through our community. People are coming here and staying. They're elderly, and now their children are their dogs, basically, and they really adore them. And it's great that we can actually accommodate them in a couple of dog off-leash areas for now, but we are endeavouring to do the policy work and look into the background of what is required for having dog off-leash areas in our whole community. So there'll be things like dog on-leash areas in the streets, in the main town centres, and responsible dog ownership, basically. And basically we'll be looking at the opportunities that we can give to them. So we look forward to this report and hope that it comes through more sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pels. Councillor Ellis.
My words are to corroborate the mover of this motion and simply say, look, thanks to the members of our community that have petitioned council in relation to this matter. It is a matter that's been recognised by council for quite some time, and officers in corroboration with council have been working to identify the best manner in which to meet the demands of the dogs off leash issue, and subsequently I look forward to final reports and actions coming back before council in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Is there any further speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So item 2.1 is notice of motion number 2, 2018, the East Gippsland Shire become a refugee welcome zone. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors, for this opportunity to present this motion before council. Can I draw your attention to page 8 of this evening's agenda and ask you to follow me through as I put the particular recommendation to Council and then provide you with the rationale. I request that Council declare East Gippsland Shire Council a refugee zone and to acknowledges that this declaration is a commitment in spirit to welcoming refugees into our community, upholding the human rights of refugees, demonstrating compassion for refugees, and enhancing cultural and religious diversity in our community. There's strong rationale which I draw your attention to in the accompanying documents. Mr Mayor, I'm happy to read it verbally out, or if your councillors are happy, I'm quite prepared just to say a few words.
I think most councillors would have read the... Yep, so if you'd just like to say a few words, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you for that indulgence, Mr Mayor. The issue of refugees in this country is topical, I do appreciate, but I've been approached by a number of our community members who have formed an organisation within the East Gippsland community to take care and welcome refugees into our community. I am aware of at least 12 refugee families residing in the city of Bairnsdale at the present time. The rationale will show that there is no binding commitments or anything deleterious to the wellbeing of the Shire of East Gippsland by adopting this welcome zone concept. I have had the fortune to meet a number of these people over the course of years as a councillor and have noted the beneficial things that they bring to our community. Resultingly, to keep things moving, Mr Mayor, I recommend the recommendation to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Pels, speak.
I'd just like to say I'm delighted to be able to support Councillor Ellis in this motion. We are a diverse region. We're very accepting. Refugees have skills that we actually need and require in our community. They're looking for a better life, and they could go no further than coming to East Gippsland and enjoying our region and our facilities, and we'd love to have them. The bottom line is we are a community of as it says here, we are a community that was based on refugees basically, and they've got terrible backgrounds and stories to tell. The bottom line is they can come to our region and enjoy a much better life, and I hope they do. I'd like to encourage all councillors to support Councillor Ellis in this no-brainer motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pels. Any speakers against the motion?
No, not against. No, I just wanted to make a comment, that was all.
Councillor Buckley.
I just wanted a question more than anything.
Yeah, question.
Did this reflect any way in the refugees that are stuck up in Manus Island, or how do we get on about that in this recommendation? Because the federal government has said that no way are they going to come here. Is there any way we can put a clause in here somewhere to suggest that we be a little bit more compassionate and in that matter? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Would you like to...
Would you like me to reply, Mr
Yes,
Mayor?
Councillor Ellis.
I think this statement and this application is a separate issue. This is a community-focused welcome to refugees that have been recognised by the federal government. If I have compassion for the people that are stuck on Manus Island, but I don't believe this motion before Council relates to that particular action. This welcomes people that have already been identified and been through the processes that the wider country have adopted to allow people into our country. The Manus Island matter is, I'm sure, a matter for our federal government and perhaps for our local federal minister, Mr Chester, rather than for this chamber.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Is there any further speakers? Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Ellis, I just want to commend you for bringing this notice of motion to the chamber. It's a great thing that you've done. I'm very grateful for you doing it, and I think I'm almost humbled by the words that you've said. It's really very, very powerful. Many of us know the second verse of our national anthem is for those who've sailed across the sea with boundless plains to share. And I think that is a really strongly symbolic line in our national anthem that underpins the spirit of generosity and the need to open our hearts and our communities to those refugees. They're refugees for a reason, because they're fleeing war, famine, devastation, and we are a country of wealth and generosity and open hearts and great values. And I think that this is really very, very important and highly symbolic. And councillors, I think we should all applaud Councillor Ellis for bringing this to us and absolutely resoundingly support it.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Any further speakers? I'd just like to make a couple of comments, Councillor Ellis. Again, just supporting what Councillor Reeves said. We did actually see this working very, very well in the Toowoomba Regional Council when we visited there last year, where they were not only a welcome region for refugees, but also their state actually supported them with services to actually take it to the next level. And I was keen to know whether you'd be prepared to prosecute what we're going to pass here tonight, if I can be preemptive enough to suggest that, whether you'd take that through GLGN and other advocacy areas to see if we can get more supportive services out in the region to make this more than just a mere gesture.
Well, thank you for those words, Mr. Mayor. The note of the state government is providing us with that sorts of assistance in some various programs. We are not the first council to become, you haven't put it to the vote. We have put forward the concept of a refugee welcome zone. There are other partner councils, including Bor from the top of my head, who are already classified as that situation. I'm happy to support that through the GLGN and put it to the other councils, hoping that they still have the same view as council has exhibited to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 3, any deferred business, Mr. CEO?
No deferred business, Mr. Mayor.
Item 4 is councillor reports. Councillor Toohey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually don't have a report for this month. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll just touch on a couple of things. My report has been sent through to the officers and it's been quite a busy July, so I'll just touch on a couple of things. The Economic Development Advisory Board met and it was great to welcome our new board member, Ross Pasalacqua. Ross has a very strong background in economic development and tourism, having previously served on Tourism North East Board and Parks Victoria, and is also currently on the East Gippsland Water Board, so we look forward to having his knowledge and expertise with us. I attended a community reference group meeting on the Stockman mine, which was held on the same day it was announced that the Round Oak Minerals were granted an infrastructure mining licence. This will bring the project one step closer, and should everything go to plan, we're hoping to see construction late 2019, early 2020. This will be a great economic boost for the whole region, and not only economically but socially as well, bringing in hopefully a population influx. I attended the 4th annual MND Business of Sport Luncheon, where we heard from a range of guest speakers from politics through to football, everyone gathering in aid of raising awareness and support for motor neurone disease. During the course of the day, an auction was also held and 2,600 was presented directly to the Chair of Omeo District Health in support of MND. But perhaps the most exciting news we had this month was the announcement of the Omeo Mountain Bike project receiving $1.5 million from the Building Better Regions Fund. And this was actually the only project from the whole of Gippsland to receive funding from that Building Better Regions. This project will transform our region, create jobs, drive economic growth and build a stronger community. Lastly, I attended the Regional Telecommunications Review consultation last week in Bairnsdale, which was very well attended by a range of people from all over the Shire. This review was held nationally, and it was actually the second last meeting to be held. They were off to Hamilton in the afternoon, but the chair of the committee commended everyone that attended and actually said that the amount of participants who were at that meeting had far exceeded any other meeting that they had attended. So it was probably a testament to the amount of issues that East Gippsland face in terms of NBN, internet and mobile reception. So we look forward to the recommendations that the panel will make back to the government and hope to see some change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Good evening, councillors, officers and guests in the gallery. It's nice that you're here. My report has been submitted, but I'll just draw out two matters that I'd be really keen to highlight. One was NAIDOC Week and the flag raising ceremony at the start of last month, which was really well attended back then, and it's really an important event given the rich Indigenous history and the large number of people who identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who live in our community, and I was delighted to be there with so many others. And the other matter I'm going to draw out is today I facilitated for the GALLON, the Gippsland East Local Learning and Employment Network, their fourth, I think it was the fourth, maybe even the fifth, Inspiring Young Men's event. Now, I'm probably neither inspiring nor young, so I just had the job of facilitating some very inspiring community leaders in helping some young men on their journey in the next stage. And the real focus of that event is around helping those young men focus their attention and their next stage of their journey, whether it's past compulsory education, into post-compulsory education or work or a vocation or a trade, and having some great mentors around them to wrap around them. And I really commend the work of the LEN. You know, it's a bit of an unsung hero in our community, the Gippsland East Local Learning and Employment Network. It's an aggregator of business and education providers, and it just beavers away very quietly and very effectively. So to Don and the team at the GALLON, I take my hat off to them, and I'm always happy to support that event. And thank you to those men who donated their time. And there were students from Orbost, Lakes Entrance, Bairnsdale and Nagle there today. About 35 students, young men. Good on them. That's enough from me.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On last Saturday, I stumbled into a job of being the scorekeeper at the Bucking game. Yeah, it was between Swift Creek and Omeo, affectionately known as Boyo. And anyway, the scoreboard was rather difficult. It was one of those digital boards with funny little tags on it, you know, and all the numbers, you can make them up out of squares. And it was as confusing to me as a game of Scrabble. And anyway, I had lots of advice too from the, because this board is up in amongst the crowd in the public area. So anyway, we managed to stumble through towards the, and in the very last couple of seconds of the game, the Creekers kicked a goal, bang. And the score was to come up as that they'd won by a point. And anyway, the central umpires and the other umpires conferred in the middle for about 10 minutes or so, and I was waiting for the signal from the centre to declare that board was right, but it never came. And then everybody started to go over towards the sheds, the public area, and I sung out to the umpy. I said, hey, what's the deal, mate? And he said, Omeo, Bernamber Omeo have won by a point. And I thought, well, gee, where does this leave us? And anyway, they go on into the sheds, and the euphoria, the initial euphoria was dumbed right down then because the Creeker thought they'd won. And anyway, then they had another conference about it all, and it was about half an hour later that they decided, after they'd sung, that the Omeo people had sung their song, that they'd won, and they were breaking out the beer and what have you, and then it was reversed again. And by this time, a lot of the disappointed Greek supporters had gone home anyway. So that was my Saturday. And I don't think I'll have to endure another one like that for a while. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Ellis.
I'm almost speechless. I don't think any report could ever match that. I think I'm like everyone else. I've just double-checked my diary because I had a particularly busy July. But when I look at it for things to report to council, they're quite few and far between. NAIDUP week, as Councillor Rees referred to, was an important week for the Shire and was celebrated across our entire region. A couple of points. I attended on behalf of the Mayor the annual U3A annual general meeting and presentations. It was my privilege to take part in the awarding of a number of long service awards to the stalwarts of that organisation, an organisation with in excess of 400 members. Out of all of that, I'd like to acknowledge in particular the work of Mr and Mrs Bernard West, who are stalwarts and really are part of the engine room of that organisation. I also attend with other councillors the 150th year celebration of the Shire of Bairnsdale, and in particular visiting the exhibition of memorabilia to celebrate the occasion conducted by the Bairnsdale Historical Society in the most impressive location and building. The celebration was a wonderful opportunity to gain an understanding of the many challenges that still face our current council that arose from those days of the Shire of Bairnsdale. I have provided a written report which I'll submit to council that outlines a couple of other matters. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. I was a bit concerned that you were going to mention that you saw a picture of me in the Historical Society. I was a bit worried about that.
I saw a great haircut, Mr Mayor.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's been a reasonably busy month, but just a few brief comments. Chairing the Livestock Consultative Committee meeting earlier in July was interesting that we're now trialling the new sheep scanning, and has so far gone okay. But something else that was discussed was more about coming sales, because the last 12 months the throughput through the yards has been quite substantial, and it looks like Shire's done well with their charges. But unfortunately, a lot of those livestock have been forced sales, and today's Wyndham Spring sale is a reminder of what's to come, in that it's well down on previous years for numbers. So the reason being that many of the stock that would have come forward have already been sold. So it's very disappointing for the farmers out there. Also, earlier in the month, I got the opportunity to fill in for our mayor at the Inner Wheel Bairnsdale changeover dinner, and it was great. It was a dinner where there was a lot of the people in there that I did know, and it was great to just to congratulate them on their efforts of raising funds and how they distribute them in the community to the less fortunate. And you've got to say, they do an amazing job, as many of the service clubs do. Also, I attended the 150 years of the Bairnsdale Shire, and I was quite happy to be one of the people who actually did live in the old Bairnsdale Shire, so it was quite good. And there was a number of people there that I hadn't seen for many years, and it was good to catch up. We've had our audit committee meeting also during that month, but the last thing I attended was the staff awards at the Forge Theatre, and it was really, really fun, and well done to all the staff who recognised for their efforts for the year. But I'm thinking now it's going to be hard to look at some of them now in a professional capacity after their stage performances, and it's good to see Kaya's just come into the room. So,
I'm still the same.
So, but anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Pearls.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My report's very brief for the month. The weather's has been again changing, with golden wattles now reaching full bloom along the Mitchell River. And if you get the chance to go and have a look, go and enjoy them, because they are spectacular. The river is just a bloom of golden yellow, and it's quite a sight to see. That's only available between from 7 to 10 days when it's in full bloom. It's gorgeous. And unfortunately for the farmers, the garden lovers, we've not had much rain, but climate-wise we've been fortunate enough to be able to enjoy mild winter temperatures reaching 19 to 20 degrees. Now I say this because I've been busy moving my aged father. We have a new resident in the region, a new resident of East Gippsland. He's a 90-year-old man who has come from Melbourne. In fact, he's been a Collins Street businessman, and he has moved to the region, and he is so delighted with how easy life is for him. And I wanted to put it in my report so that people in Melbourne, if they're listening to this, they will say, well, we might even consider moving to East Gippsland, because he just said the people are friendly, the meat is great, the vegetables are fantastic, the weather's fantastic, and it's a great place to come and live. So with that in mind, welcome Melville Walter Wakefield to East Gippsland. And I'd just like to bring up in my report the frustrating commutes that we've had with the roadworks going to and from Melbourne. And I know it's a legacy, but I just wanted to also say next week we have the seats meeting down in Warrigal, and I'll be bringing it up with the Vic Roads people to see if there's anything they can do to alleviate the wait times and the time that we have to drop down to 40 kilometres an hour expecting roadworks to be done, whereas you know, in the realistic moment of it all, there's no one doing any work anywhere. So I think they need to be more respectful for the road users, and particularly the transport companies. We're losing downtime with it, and there is a formula that actually is calculated, and we can actually average out how much we're losing in downtime, and it is actually quite substantial. For a trucking business like ours, it would equate to about $5,000 a month. So, you know, it's not something to be snobbed at, it's a very realistic thing, and I think they need to be more respectful of all road users, whether they be in transport or whether they be coming to visit in our region. So I'll be bringing that to their attention next week. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pells. Thank you, councillors. I've also submitted my report for the month. Probably a couple of key things. Our last meeting was up at Orbost, and it was great to have that meeting, one of those meetings outside the corporate centre. But part of that meeting, we were lucky enough to get a tour of the Orbost gas plant upgrade, and the significant investment of around $300 million of APA refurbishing that plant was quite significant. Also, the official opening of the Broadrib boat ramp, and more recently the opening of the Buck and Orbost Bridge. It was pleasing to greet and welcome into the region Peter Greenham from Greenham Meat Processing, who their family have purchased the meatworks at Moe and refurbishing it to fully get it back to better than the capacity it was before, but also an opportunity for them to source supply of cattle from East Gippsland and the high country. The Greenham family purchased that facility in Moe and have made a commitment to Gippsland, and it will be known as the Greenham Meatworks. The new refurbished facility will build capacity to process 500 cattle a day. This also has given them the opportunity to connect with producers directly in our region and into the high country to develop potentially a brand specifically for East Gippsland. And then Councillor O'Connell and the AMO BTA are also working on a potentially high country beef brand as well. The beauty of the Greenham family, it's a fourth generation meat processing family. They know their stuff. They also have a supply chain robust process which is recognised around the world, and if our producers support their facility, their quality assurance facility and process, they will also receive a premium on their livestock as they sell them through our selling East Gippsland Livestock Exchange. So that it's a win-win situation. It's an opportunity for us to again show Australia that East Gippsland is a major food producer, and this traceability actually traces the cattle back to the paddock it was born. So it's a really important project, and I look forward to seeing how the BTA up at Omeo work with that project. Also had the opportunity during the month to attend the Vic Tourism VTIC 2018 conference held at Cape Shank last week. It was an excellent two-day conference with some excellent visitor economy content. More importantly, the program provided plenty of opportunity to network and advocate for the East Gippsland region and the visitor economy. Anne Hardy launched her newly developed app that was researched and developed through the University of Tasmania. This app has now been commercialised as Tourism Tracer, and it gives regions that use this app an in-depth knowledge and insight into our visiting tourists and their behaviour and what things they visit. It actually produces a heat map of where they visit, and then becomes a very useful tool for us to advocate to government where we need infrastructure and resources. The other key thing that happened at that event was the Tourism Victoria used the conference to launch Regional Victoria Your Happy Space. And I think our region is well positioned to take advantage of this next huge launch by Tourism Victoria. The major intrastate tourism campaign called Regional Victoria Your Happy Space hopes to bring more Melburnians out to the region. And one of the statistics that really stuck in my head was that 53% of Melburnians have never ventured outside of Melbourne and into our regions. And if they did and stayed just one night anywhere in our regions, it would generate $2 billion approximately of economic activity. So a significant opportunity for us to focus on. Your Happy Space showcases our stunning regions, diverse experience and world-class food, art, music, nature and culture that Victoria has to offer. Tourism means serious business for our economy, with just over 50 million people visiting regional Victoria in 2018, up 20% since 2014, and spending some $9.7 billion and creating thousands of jobs. And just lastly, the East Gippsland Shire Staff Awards. I did attend with Councillor White, and I'd just like to comment on Sam McPherson, who achieved the individual Top Behaviours Award. Top behaviours are the non-negotiable culture, behaviours and pillars for the East Gippsland Shire organisation. And TOP is an acronym for teamwork, organisational awareness, prioritisation and problem solving in servicing our community's needs. And just interestingly, Sam was also part of the Gippsland Community Leadership Program in last year's cohort, and is really shining for the organisation. Thank you. Item 5.1.1 is East Gippsland Planning Scheme Amendment C139, Tambo Bluff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council, this is a report that seeks adoption of the East Gippsland Planning Scheme Amendment C139. It also seeks to approval to lodge the East Gippsland Planning Scheme Amendment C139 with the Minister of Planning for approval under the Planning and Environment Act. Councillors, over time there has been numerous needs to amend the planning scheme as it relates to Tambo Bluff. Unfortunately, there has been some removal of certain controls within the planning scheme over certain parcels of land, and there has been some controls left on certain parcels of land that should have been removed. This amendment seeks to rectify that. In addition, this proposal seeks to address some difficulties with certain landowners being able to develop their land. The planning scheme sought to consolidate lots on land that was not appropriate for development due to topography and native vegetation. We've sought to reconfigure the restructure overlay so that those properties now can be developed and avoid the significant steep slopes and the native vegetation on those sites. Indeed, this amendment continues to provide some clarity for users of the planning scheme. It seeks to introduce a tool where the end subdivision layout of Tambo Bluff will be introduced into the planning scheme and should hope to minimise these accidental errors into the future. Councillors, there was one unsupportive submission by a landowner. Our officers were able to resolve that concern therefore, given there are no unsupportive submissions, council is able to make a decision to adopt or abandon this amendment without the need for an independent planning panel. Councillors, the recommendation in front of you seeks to adopt the exhibited planning scheme documentation associated with the amendment, adopt the amended Tambo Bluff restructure plan, including the recommended change to 26 Peter Road that address that particular owner's concerns, and submit to the Minister of Planning the adopted planning scheme amendment C139. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hollow. Councillors, are there any questions? If there's no questions, we do have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Move Councillor Toohey. Do I have a seconder? Councillor White. Speakers?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I see this as a common sense amendment that we're making to alleviate some issues that people have had up there in the past, and you know, allow a number of people to be able to move forward and an orderly approach to what's happening up there. So I'm happy to recommend this. Thank you, Councillor Toohey. Councillor White, did you want to speak?
Yes, I would concur with this. In looking at the overheads that you've provided, it just makes common sense that there was some pieces of land there that virtually had no value, but the way you've structured it, allowing property owners to amalgamate, and particularly at Peter Road, where the gentleman owned the other access point to his property, I think it should satisfy those involved. So I'm happy with your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Is there any further speakers? Councillor Ellis.
Just very quickly, and that's just to say this has been a 10 to 11 year journey in planning from the time that the Shire took the initiative to sort out the planning problems of the Tambo Bluff, or what was known as the Blue Horizons estate mess that was inherited by council. Council's worked through it, and with the members of the community at Tambo Bluff. I hope this finally consolidates all of the planning issues for that community, and that we can now move on with a most progressive development down at that part of Meatone, where there is a lot of economic growth and opportunity in that particular region to be taken advantage of. I commend the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Is there any further speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.1.2 is the proposal to end Section 173 Agreement AF 202923J as it relates to Lot 2 on plan of subdivision 802715L and lots A 1 to 3, 7, 8, 11, 12, 14, 15, 17 to 20, 22 to 27 and 29 inclusive on plan of subdivision 802718E, 69 Ashley Street and 114 Newlands Drive, Paynesville. Mr Hollow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this report seeks a council's decision to provide in principle support for the ending of the agreement. The agreement was required to ensure that the Coast Estate developed in a coordinated manner with the adjoining land holding known as Paynesville Park. Unfortunately, that agreement locked in the subdivision as was approved by planning permit 583/2004/P/A. And the agreement does not provide a future lot owner to seek to re-subdivide their lot, even with an approved planning permit, without having to end this agreement. Councillors, we have had long discussions with the landowner. That particular landowner, which is a syndicate of people, have entered into new agreements that protect the community's interests, that allow and continue to have a staged manner in which this subdivision will continue to roll out. It will ensure that infrastructure is provided in a logical and efficient manner, ensure that open space is provided effectively. However, it will allow for the agreements to sunset upon the completion of those relevant stages, and that should give some confidence to both council and landowners that the ending of this agreement is a sensible planning proposition. Councillors, this report seeks in principle consent of council, and we will undertake the necessary public notice as described in the Planning Environment Act, and that a further report as to whether the agreement should end or not will be presented back to council in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hollow. Questions, councillors? If there's no questions, we do have a recommendation. Councillor Tu, you have a question, please.
Yeah, Mr. Hollow, when you say the proposal will, or the requirement will sunset upon finalisation of each stage, does that mean when every block is built on, or just every block is sold in each stage?
Upon the issue of statement of compliance that says that all the requirements for that particular stage have been met.
And I'll try and, I think I know what your question. It is not, it won't sunset, it won't relate to the building of the houses. It will relate to the establishment of the subdivision itself. So it would sunset, and then houses would be able to be built.
Any further questions? If not, there is a recommendation before us, councillors. Do we have a mover? Move Councillor Pels. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Reeves. The speakers.
I'd just like to say it's good to see these developers getting their getting organised and producing new accommodation for our residents to move into. It's going to be a really good, substantial residence, and though I know people will move into it and think this is a really great facility, so pleased to be seeing these types of jobs coming on board and to be able to be passing them forward.
Thank you, Councillor Pels. If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. So item 5.1.3 is planning permit application 53/2018P, use and development of a residential village and alteration of access to a road zone, Category 1 at 11 Eastern Beach Road, Lakes Entrance. Mr. Hollow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In accordance with Council's planning permit application policy, this matter is being reported to Council because it's in excess of $5 million. Councillors, this is a proposal for a residential village. It's proposed to comprise of 94 dwellings, community centre, including an indoor pool, garden plots and men's sheds. It has 23 Vista car parking spaces, including 1 accessible car space. It has an internal road network, and it has associated services including footpath links to the surrounding network of footpaths within the area. Councillors, public notification for this proposal was carried out, and there was no objections raised by the local community. In the planner's view, in the planning office view, this is a proposal that is very well suited to the location, well suited to the property, and fits with all the right planning policy, and including the general residential 1 zone. Councillors, you will note that with the recommendation, there is part of that recommendation that seeks that Council delegates to the Chief Executive Officer the authority to assess and grant any amendment to the planning permit. Councillors, this has been deliberately added into our recommendation because should Council see fit to determine to issue a planning permit for this proposal, the permit applicant has raised the question with us that they may not need to construct the swimming pool as part of the facility because they may decide to utilise Lakes Entrance Aquadome as it is in very close proximity of this proposal. Councillors, happy to take questions.
Questions from councillors? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can you tell me whether or not there's any vehicular access to Golf Links Road from this development?
There is neither vehicle access or pedestrian access, Councillor.
Any further questions?
I do have a couple more, Mr Mayor, of your indulgence. Have the the provisions of the permit been provided to the planning staff of the applicant and to the applicant himself? Is he aware of the conditions?
I believe so, Councillor, and there has been numerous negotiations and discussions with this particular landowner, and indeed my officer attended their private consultations with the local community as well.
Okay, so just to clarify, taking into account our more recent experiences, is the applicant aware of the permit conditions that are before Council tonight, and has he expressed an opinion as to whether he is satisfied and able to comply with those conditions?
Yes, the permit applicant had some discussions about the provision of some footpath provision within Council's existing street network, also about the staging of the proposal and those conditions, and the officer and the planning consultant working for the landowner were able to come up with a very good solution and fashion some conditions that are satisfactory to both parties.
Yeah. Mr Holden.
Just to clarify something through you, Mr Mayor, whilst the applicant would be aware of the conditions of the permit, we do not seek and would not expect to get any formal acknowledgement or acceptance of those conditions prior to the matter being reported to Council. It is not part of the process to seek the applicant's endorsement of those conditions prior to it being reported to Council for pretty obvious reasons. So they may be aware of it, but I don't believe we have any formal notification from them that they are either happy with them or endorse them. But to our best knowledge, we have informal and I guess negotiated agreement around that they are in there, and we've put those conditions together in consultation with them to some degree.
And finally, just one other question is, do you see any other reason why the CEO would need to delegate his authority, if that is accepted as part of the recommendations this evening, on any matters other than the swimming pool associated with this application?
The primary reason why the recommendation is the way it is because of the swimming pool issue, which was raised with my officers late in the piece. Councillor, there is always, with large proposals, some finessing that may need to be undertaken. I would suggest that certainly Chief Executive Officer, if he believed it was not a minor alteration, that he may well choose to have the matter reported to Council as a matter of due course.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Any further questions? We do have a recommendation before us. If there's no further questions, let's move Councillor Ellis.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
second,
Mayor.
Councillor White. Councillor Ellis, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This has been a long-awaited application for use of land that has sat in Lakes Entrance for a particularly long time, as long as I can recall, in an unused situation. This particular application exhibits the benefits of our recent planning scheme amendments initiated earlier in the year by Council. The program appears to be a win-win situation for the Township of Lakes Entrance, where in the long term we can welcome a large number of new residents to our township and take advantage of the facilities within that region. The planning scheme and the conditions appear to me to be quite reasonable. The delegation, based on the words of Mr Hollow, are practical, and the end product is that the Shire will benefit from development such as this. We are in need of affordable housing concepts, and this perhaps is the first of these projects of such a scale for many years. The Township of Lakes Entrance will be enhanced by that matter. As such, I commend the recommendation before Council and look forward to the developers taking an early start in the creation of a new community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor White, would you like to add any further comments?
Only to say that I fully concur with what Councillor Ellis has said. He's actually taken most of the comments I would have made. I would perhaps go one step further without perhaps not wanting to offend the previous owners, but I would have called that area almost a wasteland, and it is really good to see that something's going to be developed there which will benefit Lakes Entrance, particularly as the people who would move there would be in need of services from the community rather than looking for jobs. They would actually be retirees and would add a lot of value to the town's amenities and supermarkets, service stations, etc. So I think this is a wonderful project.
Thank you, Councillor White. Is there any further speakers? If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.2.1 is the report on Audit and Risk Committee meeting held 24th of July 2018. Ms. Cashman, sorry. I was looking at Ms. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The report before you tonight provides an overview of the issues that were considered at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 24th of July 2018. As the report denotes, the key issues that were discussed at that particular meeting were the interim management letter in relation to the 2017-18 financial year audit, the AMBIT internal audit plan for 2018 to 2021, which was presented to us by Mr Andrew Zavitzanos, who is the partner of Crowe Horwath, Council's newly appointed internal auditor. The findings from the Raymond Island Ferry audit were also tabled at that particular meeting, and again Mr Andrew Zavitzanos presented those on behalf of Crowe Horwath, who undertook that particular audit for us. The draft risk management policy and framework, together with the new occupational health and safety policy statement and procedures, which I believe will be presented shortly. The June 2018 procurement compliance report and its findings, and further the draft project management framework, which was a large body of work that has been undertaken by numerous officers and has taken quite a while to come to fruition. Nothing of real significance was actually highlighted at that particular meeting, and the committee members were very complimentary of the fact that we are starting to tick off some of those long-standing items, which is something to be congratulated. So if there are no further questions, I would like to propose that the Council note the report, and if there are any other questions, I'm happy to field those. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Cashman. Questions, councillors? Councillor Pels.
Yes, are we able to delete wording out of the recommendation just to make it word better?
So you'd like to amend?
Just amend the wording, because I don't think it's fair to say, I'm looking at the executive summary, and it's 1, 2, 3, 1.4, and it's the bit that I don't like. The bit that I don't like about it is I think it's unnecessary to say. It reads, it's the last sentence in dot point 4. In their assessment, the issue identified were not reflecting a culture issue, but were the consequences of an extraordinary set of circumstances. I think the issue was the extent of a ordinary set of circumstances is better, and I think we need to take out the reflect a cultural issue. I don't think it's suitable to be in there.
Ms Bennett.
Councillor, it's too late to do that now. Certainly councillors have the option of making a recommendation that notes that. But essentially, this is a report, it's a document of public record now.
Okay, for what it's worth.
So would you like to amend the motion to add that note? Is that what you'd like to do?
To take it out? Well, the recommendation, I can't change the officer's recommendation.
You can certainly change the officer's recommendation, but you would need to put a fresh recommendation up recommending that the officer's report be changed.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I'm happy to wear it knowing
Councillor Ellis, did you have a question as well?
I do, Mr Mayor. Coming out of what Councillor Peltz has been speaking about, and I'm just going back to the point. It's in relation to the report, and it's questions. It's not a request for an amendment, and it relates to the Raymond Island Ferry audit and the report. The report's not telling council at this level what actions were taken by the Audit and Risk Committee in relation to the audit inquiry that was taken out in relation to the ferry. All it tells us is that the officers were provided with certain informations, that they cooperated with the internal auditor, and that they were going to look at something in future. So my immediate question, having said those words, is what actions were taken by the Audit and Risk Committee in relation to that? Was council provided with details of that audit inquiry?
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Ms.
Councillor, the council was provided with the, and there were actually actions in that report, and there were managers' comments on that report, and the audit committee saw all that, and that was also brought to council.
My recollection, there was a 9-point scorecard that they went through and scored us accordingly with requirements for comments and actions.
That may well be so. I think you're missing what I'm trying to say, and that is there's no mention here that this work was reported back to council, and council was the initiator of the request for this inquiry in relation to the matter of the issue of the Raymond Island Ferry works. And so if you read that, it says that something was done, an audit was taken, and it was discussed by councillors. So if I can refer you, and with your indulgence, Mr Mayor, if you reread that paragraph, and probably the answer is yes, a report was supplied to council, but at this stage, as far as the council is concerned, there's nothing. We've got a report, but it's not in the report here. It's not in here.
It's not attached.
No. Well, I'm not asking for it to be. I appreciate there are confidential matters. What I'm saying is that in the reporting, we are not being clear. It's just saying certain things occurred. If you can, do you follow what I'm saying?
Not 100%, no.
Well, the simple thing is, if I'm a member of the public and I read the agenda of the East Gippsland Shire Council and I read the report here, I read in the first sentence, council requested that an internal audit be undertaken, purpose which to assess two actions. There was then an expectation that that report would have come back to council, and there's no record that this was reported back to council.
Yep, so we just need to change the recommendation that this report came back to council.
That's important. The officer could have been able to say to me, yes, it was, and you were provided with a report. I mean, we're trying to be transparent here in our actions.
We were. We all got a copy of that report.
I think you're missing it's not recorded in the minutes. It's not recorded in the report. That's what I'm saying.
This is a report on the audit committee.
Yeah,
Meeting.
Yeah, it says, Mr. Mayor, if I may indulge, dot point 4, Mr. Zanson also presented the findings and recommendations of the Raymond Island Ferry Audit Report. So it's stated there, Mr. Ellis, Councillor Ellis, and it says Crowe have emphasised that during the conduct of the audit they had full management cooperation and that the improvements to policy and practice have already been made. So they've made improvements to policy and practices. In their assessment, the issues identified did not reflect a cultural issue but were the consequences of an extraordinary set of circumstances that people then had to manage as best they could at the time. I added that last word in, but that's what it states. So it's there.
Again, no, I'm simply asking, you know, was this matter reported back to council, back to the council? It's as simple as that. Because this here just talks about procedures and what's been going on, not that, which it was, the council, the council asked for the matter that was handled by Mr. Waits to be looked at by the internal auditor. And you on our behalf, Mr. Mayor, took that back as an action requested by council to the audit committee to address.
Yep.
They've done that work, but they're not reporting back to council that work was undertaken. Now, this might be only a little thing, but it's a matter of saying it's clear. And I'm saying that report's not that clear. It should be clearly stated that council was informed and that a written report was provided to council so that we can are accountable for the matters that are undertaken on our behalf.
Councillor Reeves.
So this might be a question for either Ms Bennett or Mr CEO. So this report that's in front of us is that council is noting the meeting and the audit report, the audit committee meeting. That's what it is. We're just noting that it took place.
That's correct.
That's all we're doing in this one. And the content or those discussions of the audit committee can be accessed or made available or in another forum, in another way, shape or form. This is, we're not drilling down into the different reports that were in that audit committee. We are just noting that an audit committee took place and the meeting took place. We're noting that. And here's the content of it, of that meeting. Well, I think it is, because I respectfully understand that you disagree, but that's been the common practice, that we note that an audit committee meeting took place and here's the content. And we have deferred that information to the audit committee. Is that correct, Ms Bennett?
Ms Bennett will respond.
Through you, Mr Mayor. You're quite correct, Councillor Reeves. Every document that is reviewed by the audit committee is also provided to councillors electronically. The minutes and any actions arising from those are also communicated to councillors. So it's just literally not possible for the audit committee to consider anything that doesn't also go to councillors, and that has been the practice for many years now.
May I just add, Mr Mayor, from my recollections, we had the verbal discussion in the audit committee on the 24th of July, and then we had the councillor CEO discussion on the same day, and Ms Bennett ended up coming in and giving us a briefing, and you also gave us a bit of a briefing about the Raymond Island Ferry, and I think we did actually all chat about the Raymond Island outage report, which is what I'm holding now. And it's a document that we did discuss around the table on the 24th of July, the day after the audit committee meeting.
I only just want to say I don't dispute that. I don't dispute any of the facts that's coming out. I am just simply saying that if this is a report of happenings within the audit committee being reported to council, then I would simply expect that a report a sentence would be saying that stating something as simple as the results of our actions were reported to the council on a certain date. And that's what was my basic question to the officer. It wasn't questioning whether anything was there. What I'm trying to do is maintaining a level of transparency where an action is requested by council, it's processed, which it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. Actions were coming, it was brought back to council and it was gone. But for the record, that's not shown. And if we just simply pass this report as such, as adopting this report, then we're not showing what actually came from that particular audit committee meeting. I mean, I'll leave it to you as councillors to make the decision. I'm not trying to challenge what works weren't done because the report was of value and it gave us a good understanding of certain things. And a lot of that report is confidential, and I'm trying to keep that out of the confidentiality issues out of this conversation. But the point is, we do have a need to be able to show that an action was requested by council. Council is operating correctly as a board should do, and that a report was made back to council. And that's it. No, nothing more than that. Nothing more untoward.
Mr Mayor, I move the motion be put.
Okay. So we've got a mover and a seconder for...
I've only got a mover.
Need a seconder for the motion before it can be put. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Pearls. Councillor Reeves has asked for the motion to be put. All those in favour?
Oh, I'm going to talk to it.
Not once it's been put.
Well, I'm going to talk to it before you vote on it.
I think once the motion's been asked to be put, there's no further debate.
He's moved it, I've seconded it, and he has the right to talk to it, I have the right to second on it.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. Anyhow, feel free, Councillor Pearls.
I would just like to state to the community that the report done by Cosley Howarth and particularly done by Andrew Sadbitson was particularly good, and it was very honest and very straight to the point. And I think it was a document that we needed to see, particularly, and I think all of us internally, all of the councillors and particularly the staff got a lot out of this report. And we learned a lot with regards to our mechanisms on areas that we needed to improve on, and I think it's been a very beneficial document for us to actually seek.
100%.
So I'm just saying, with regards to that, it was a fantastic report. I think the community will be very happy that with the outcomes that will be put into place, will serve our community very well into the future. So thank you for that time.
Yes, definitely, Councillor Pearls. I would reiterate your comments that it was a well-produced product by Crowe Horwath that unpacked a lot of complexities. All those in favour of the motion? It was a procedural motion that the motion be put.
Yeah, but I have the right to speak against the motion.
Okay.
Mr Mayor, I could ask for a point of order.
Yeah, I know.
Well, please go ahead.
So the point is that I've asked the motion be put.
It is a procedural motion when someone asks to be put.
Well, you're cutting
However,
off.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to indulge Councillor Ellis because he is very keen to talk to this matter, if you are as well, Mr Mayor.
Yes, I would be happy with that. Councillor.
Well, thank you, Councillor Reeves. You're a decent man. Look, I'd simply want to say, bring councillors' attention to the recommendation and say this, that council notes this report on issues considered by the East Gippsland Shire Council Audit Committee at its meeting on the 24th of July 2018. My point against this is simply that it's not a full and accurate representation of a particular action taken. I want to clarify, so this is very clear, the issue of the report is not in question by me, number one. Number two, that report was brought to councillors for consideration and discussion, is not in dispute either. I have no dispute with any of the things that Councillor Pelt said in relation to the report, nor in fact with what Councillor Reeves has also suggested. What I'm saying is that for such an important thing, remembering the amounts of money and the actions and the impact on our community, there was an action taken by council, and it has not been reported on what happened as the result of that. Did council get a response to that? No. It's something that stayed within the bowels of the organisation and in terms of processes and what have you. Again, not a negative comment, but it should have just been reported back there.
Sounded
And
somewhat negative to me.
No, well, it's not. It's a process and a transparency process. It's not complicated.
I can't see the
Anyhow, I'm not here to argue on that point, Mr Mayor.
No, I'll put
That's
the motion.
my opposition to the motion before council. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. 6 in favour, 2 against. Thank you, Ms Cashman. Item 5.2.2 is review of council's policies, workplace health and safety.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, we've reached that part of the meeting where I know you look forward to, where we talk about policies because of the excitement factor. However, this is a very significant policy, covering as it does the way that we look after our people, our visitors, our contractors and councillors, of course. So we're talking about occupational health and safety. It's only 12 months since you last considered an occupational health and safety policy. However, there have been some changes since then, and the policy, we believe, does need a refresh. Essentially, what has occurred in the intervening period is council has transferred across to the MAV's workplace self-insurance workers' compensation scheme, and one of the benefits of doing so is a suite of policies and procedures being rolled out by the MAV to participating councils. So while I believe we did many things well previously, this is taking us to a whole new level. And we're being encouraged to basically adopt consistent documentation, which will mean that we will comply with the benchmark standard, which is called the National Audit Tool. So as part of that, we're presenting to you this evening a new occupational health and safety policy, or perhaps a refreshed one, together with a one-pager that is basically a summary of that policy, and we're wanting you to approve the former and note the latter. We're also seeking your approval to change the status of the occupational health and safety policy from a council policy to a management policy, and to change the frequency of review to the current annual cycle to one that's based on 3 yearly turnaround. The reasons for that essentially are firstly consistency with what we're being told is the industry standard, but also what I think is the more compelling reason is that policies by their nature are higher level and essentially give the principles through which, in this case, occupational health and safety will be delivered. It's the other documents which are referenced in point 5 of your recommendation, being the occupational health and safety planning procedure and the occupational health and safety management plan that actually operationalise and drive that process. In the interest of complete disclosure, the Audit Committee did look at all of this documentation at its last meeting and was not able to form a view for recommendation to Council on recommendation 3, which is the one around changing the policy status from a council policy to a management policy. And the arguments for and against I've given you before. The other part of that was some members of the Audit Committee felt that because this is a very important policy, it should be driven at council level, and therefore there was some sentiment that it shouldn't be a management policy and some sentiment that it was perfectly appropriate. So that's one for council to determine this evening. However, there was no opposition to the proposal to change it to a 3 yearly review. given its higher order status, and essentially it just sets out the principles and the other documents do the heavy lifting. So I'm very happy to take any questions on that, but essentially that's what the recommendation is seeking. Thank you.
Questions from councillors? Councillor Pels.
Just a point of clarification, given the fact that the new proposal is for a 3-year review, will it actually be, whilst it's saying a 3-year review, a document like this, I believe, coming from a business, and your business, this business has many similarities, OH&S needs to be reviewed yearly, basically, to see where you can tweak things, where you can upgrade things, and whilst the base policy is there, the review of systems and safety for your staff needs to be adhered to 100%. So I'm just curious as to the actual mechanism there, please.
The policy itself has no operational detail in it, and that's why it's being proposed that it has a 3-year cycle. The other documents referenced in the 5th clause will be subject to annual review. Okay. And I would add that should, for example, new legislation come through that will drive a change to those higher order principles, then if it's a management policy, those changes would be effective at management level, and if it's a council policy, it will be brought back to council for review and amendment.
Is there any further questions, councillors? We have the recommendation. If there's no moved, Councillor Pels. Do we have a second? Councillor Toohey. The speakers, Councillor Pels.
Just, OH&S, it's one of the most critical parts to a good business.
Yep.
And I believe that this is mainly a staffing issue that needs to be viewed, make life a bit easier. I think this mechanism will make our staff's life easier without giving any criticism to everyday mechanisms of OH&S issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pels. Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6, Mr CEO, is there any urgent other business?
Received nil.
Thank you, Mr CEO. We have some contracts that we need to discuss.
I'm happy to move that we go into what do we need to do? Close.
So council will now close.
Yeah, council. I move the council will now close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provisions of section 89(2)(d) of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider items 7.1 to 7.1 to 7.6, as these items relate to contractual matters. Councillors, I move.
So let's move Councillor Reeves. Do we have a second? If that, Councillor Pels. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.